So I wanted to begin by saying that one of my favorite things about the Windham-Campbell Prizes is the partnership that they have with the extraordinary Yale Review, which I hope all of you subscribe to. And for their fall issue every year, the Yale Review prints an original work by our prize winners. And I was reading last night Anne and Sigrid's wonderful works, and I came across a series of sentences in Anne's nonfiction essay, The Husband, that made me laugh a lot, and I thought I would begin with her words. I am a writer. This means I can get through any airport using the shortest possible route, but I have to check my boarding pass to see if I'm headed to Dusseldorf or Frankfurt. Being a writer means I can pack a suitcase like an absolute bastard and wash anything out in a hotel sink. It means that I can point to things and put a word to them. Nothing too complex. We are talking goose or hawk or gull here. You have a collection of essays coming out called Attention. And as I was reading those sentences, it occurred to me that getting through an airport using the shortest possible route but not knowing where you're going is a particular practice of paying attention. And I wondered if we could begin by you telling us what it means for a writer of fiction or just a writer to pay attention.
I mean, attention is almost like a meditative practice. It's allowing the world in, and it's allowing the world to be itself. And so it precedes language. But I first got interested in the word I used it for the mother in The Green Road, who's a bit of a monster in her own small, sad way, although she's interesting enough. And at the end of the book, she says, I have paid too little attention. So she's been so full of herself that she hasn't allowed the world to be. And that goes back to King Lear's realization, I've taken too little care of this, with poor Tom, where he realizes that the world exists and he should have seen it. So yeah, I chose it as a title, but it also implies some kind of stillness. And of course, this Death of a Salesman, attention must be paid to a man like this. And so it's not empathy, but it's it's both a stringent and benign form of being in relation to something else.
You have a wonderful line in The Wren, where you talk about the air between people.
Yeah, well, that's Nell. Nell is kind of young, and she realizes to her shock that people aren't the same, that people think differently. As Russell T. Hurlburt, who is a real psychologist in Nevada, did studies on different styles of consciousness and what people are thinking about it and how they think, and do they think in images or language or fully formed thoughts or impulses or all of whole way of thinking. And that goes through all my work as well. The children in The Green Road have, as my siblings did, different brains, different styles of consciousness. That's one of the reasons why they have different narrative styles as well. But Nell realizes that to love someone is not to be melded with them, is not to melt into them, is not to be one. I mean, that's a really ancient problem, going back to Aristotle, I think, is two becoming one. And she realizes, no, that you have to translate yourself so that somebody else will understand you.
Sigrid, I think one of the first novels of yours I read before I went back and read all of them was your novel, What Are You Going Through? And that novel takes its title from, I think, a really fantastic essay by Simone Weil. I wrote the title down because it's long, called Reflections on the Right Use of School Studies with a View to the Love of God. And the way that essay, that essay has a lovely line in it in which Weil writes, the love of our neighbor in all its fullness simply means being able to say to him, what are you going through? And then to know how to attend to or pay attention to that answer. So the neighbor who is afflicted is not just an example of someone who suffers or a species, but fully recognizable to us as an individual person. How do you think about the practice of paying attention? Is it meditative for you in the same way that it is for Anne?
It is, but also in that, for Wei, the idea is for her that that kind of attention isn't like prayer, is prayer, and that's what she's talking about. So when she's talking about school studies, for her, doing math in a certain way with a certain attention is indistinguishable from prayer. But the thing is that we discourage careful attention. I mean, it's the way we discourage curiosity, and I think that people aren't even aware of that. But you have a child. Well, just look at the way children stare and the kind of attention, and then they get told, stop staring, don't ask, mind your own business. You're being nosy. Also, I'm also reminded of Leonard Woolf talking about how he would often have to say to his wife, Virginia, stop staring. Because she was always paying that kind of attention. But it happens, you have the child, and the child says, why did the dog sit down? I don't know, maybe because he was tired. Well, why doesn't he go to sleep? I don't know, maybe he'll sleep later. And then there's a pause. Do dogs dream? And at that point, the adult is impatient, and just those. Instead of encouraging it, you see that happen all the time. So I think there's that attention. So when there's the kind of attention that you have to be able to get rid of distractions in order to focus on your work, which I think because of this, I think that is not so hard for us, because we like getting lost in our work. But this other kind of attention, like of paying attention to the afflictions of others, is also something that we have trouble with because we are, this is why grief and mourning are so difficult for people, because we don't know well how to focus on it, so we fall back on these, I'm sorry for your loss. So this, very poor language that we have, and you don't dwell on it, and you kind of try to say, well, you'll get, in some way, well, don't dwell on it, you'll get over it. You have to move on. And the idea that somebody would focus powerful attention on a stranger's grief, would seem a little bit inappropriate to most people. Why do you care? Why are you so focused on that? Why do you care? I'm a stranger to you. And this quote of what are you going through, when she says our neighbor, she means our stranger neighbor, not, your good friend neighbor. But if you think about that in practical terms, it doesn't feel comfortable, at least not in our culture.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the various ways of looking. Children get accused of looking, and curiosity killed the cat and all the rest, and you wonder what the secret is and what the problem is.
Where does that come from?
But Virginia Woolf's gaze is more predatory and forensic, and that is terrifying. So there are various styles of gaze, and the envious gaze, the eating up gaze. There are all kinds of ways of looking. One of my favorites when I'm writing, or early on, one that I liked was the baby's gaze, because if you look at something long enough, it becomes funny. It becomes a slightly, I'm going to say, in a benign sense, fetishized. It becomes slightly magical. It becomes very much itself. It takes on characteristics, among which that is funny. And that's the thing what a baby does. See something new and all that. Ha ha ha. If it's not wow.
Animals too, or it occurs to me that in both of your fiction, Sigrid, maybe in a more pronounced way in yours, both in The Friend and in What Are You Going Through, there's an interest in the gaze of the animal. In What Are You Going Through, it's the cat, and it always reminds me of that wonderful little essay Jacques Derrida wrote on being naked in front of his cat and confronting the gaze of the cat as the most penetrating gaze one could imagine.
That was his problem, though, really. Like not.
But the child's gaze, the gaze of the animal, the gaze of people that we don't have, or things we don't have access to, right? I'm curious how much the two of you think about widening that gaze, so it's not just the adult writer's gaze, but rather the gaze of creatures that are more, seem more inaccessible to us or more unimaginable to us.
I'm thinking of Toni Morrison's the Bluest Eye, and the cat has blue. The cat's eyes are blue streaks of horror. I think cat jumps away, and the eyes are, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. You have to avoid the word mineral when you're talking about animals' eyes. It's just a technical point. The mineral eyes of the lion. You know, I've read that too often.
Or the gem-like.
Oh, gem-like is hard, yeah.
Yeah.
But gem-like eyes, yes.
Yeah, okay. That's a whole other conversation.
Well, you know, Woolf, both of you just mentioned Woolf, and it reminds me, I mean, not to make this conversation a real bummer, but in her suicide note,
Okay.
it's about to be a bummer, she says, "I can't concentrate," right? That's the line that I always remember from the suicide note. It's when attention flags or when concentration can't be achieved that she writes, "I'm sorry, I can't concentrate." And it's as if the inability to concentrate is what makes writing and so living no longer worth doing.
Well, then she had a real double whammy there, because at the time, you know, she said, I feel I'm losing my sanity again. But Hitler was on the horizon. I mean, and the fear that England was going to be invaded. And I think right around that time where she confessed to her sister that she felt her mind was going again, and her sister Vanessa wrote to her, you know, something that, along the lines of, "Now is not the time. We are all terrified and we have to keep it together. This is the worst time." And that, I think, certainly contributed to her choosing that moment. I mean, first of all, how to concentrate in such a moment, but, you know, to take her life. I mean, even though she had tried before. But it was a terror of the war and what was going to happen, and things were looking extremely grim. So,
but there is a kind of loop, or there is a kind of conversation with the world, you know, or it's kind of interesting how words rise to meet what you see somehow, and you can. And writers talk about losing that, and it's almost like it's a kind of water rising into a footprint or something on the sand.
True.
That it you know, so that you can lose that sense of rising sap, that the ask of the page.
yeah, exactly.
To be written on, you know, or the world to be described, or, you know, that can. There's a terrifying thing, I'm sure, Merve, you know the word for it, where you can see a word, but you don't, and you've been rewriting the piece so often that you think, door, is that a word? Is that a word?
Exactly.
And
that a real word?
There is actually a term, let's say, for when the word drains of actual meaning. It just looks like little kind of shapes on the page, and you go, I'm sure that's a word.
When I was a child, I used to
Yeah.
do that with the word toilet.
Oh, yeah.
That was my word.
That's
But
great
I did-
information. That is great.
That is
talk
really
about-
interesting.
But talk about children paying attention, right?
Yeah.
It was like if I repeated this enough,
Yeah.
it would drain of meaning and the materiality of the word, just the letters,
Yeah.
would suddenly become interesting. And I think I actually became a writer because I said toilet a zillion times over and over and over again as a 5-year-old.
And
you could have flushed it, it would have drained.
I mean, it might explain some other things too, but and it seems to me
It
that
explains a lot.
yeah. well,
I think we can all
I'm
go
asking
home.
the questions and you're
I was going
confessing
to ask
things here. No,
a gentle leading question there, aren't we?
Wait, I want to get back to one thing though, about
Yeah.
what you were saying, and then, not to make this all about suicide notes, but didn't Hemingway also in some last thing that he wrote, a despairing note, I think it was, that the words won't come. It is, right? Something like that. It's over. He talked about the blank white page, looking at it every day. The words won't come. I'm out of here. That was the same thing. It was about that blank page. There was nothing else to live for. If he couldn't do that, he wasn't himself.
The current exhibition in the New York Public Library has her last walking stick, which I think is a bit gory.
Yes.
And I was looking at it thinking, did they haul it out of the river? Or did she leave it on the bank? Used in her last walk. It's a bit tabloid, isn't it? Red top.
think
It's
she-
a bit
yeah.
sensationalist. I took many pictures.
And you Instagrammed those
I
pictures.
did, yeah, I did, yeah.
You did, yeah. But it actually strikes me, Anne, that the second part of the sentences from your story that I read in Sigrid, I want to get to of your essay, and I want to get to your story in a second, Sigrid. But the second part of the sentences that I read are all about finding the right names for things, and there's a sort of joke, nothing too complex. We're talking goose or hawk or gull here, but of course you work with many more complex words than those.
So there's a great piece in Underworld by Don DeLillo about the naming the parts of a shoe, which I found extremely exciting when I read it many years ago when the book came out. The aglet and just that naming of parts. Actually, there's another poem, kind of rude poem called The Naming of Parts. But that sense of possession and power and manipulability that happens when language is supplied. Oh, I mean, it's great. So it's a lot of fun. At the end of my last book, The Wren, Nell takes language back away from the bird, because naming as possession, it's one of the... early in the Bible, Adam gets to name the beasts, which means that he can eat them, basically. Right. So don't name me, thank you. He's given, by naming, he can possess, he can kill,
Exactly.
he can eat, he is superior. So language can be that weaponized.
And there's a wonderful story by Ursula K. Le Guin called She Unnames Them, which is, she is Eve.
Oh.
A very short, beautiful, perfect story. And yes.
I want to add as a footnote that Sigrid is much nicer to dogs than I am in her books.
Well, speaking of short, beautiful, and perfect stories, New Year's Story, which is Sigrid's story in this issue of the Yale Review, features a woman named Nell who is at a dinner party where, as most dinner parties that we all are invited to these days, where the conversation revolves around our current political catastrophe in the United States. And there is a lot of consideration of how one pays attention to the world when the world seems to be falling apart around you. And one thing that Nell thinks is, it was also true that Nell was far less curious about people than she had once been. And if, as she feared, others found her boring, that was more and more how she found them. Somehow it had come about. Being with real people was less satisfying to her than reading about characters in a book or watching them on screen. Your novels are so chock full of the voices of characters from books and of other authors. The vulnerables, when I think about the first few pages, we have actually, to Eli's exercise, the opening sentences of The Years about the weather, of Bleak House about the weather, a whole medley of poems about the weather. How do you think about is it different the way we pay attention to people in real life versus the way we pay attention to characters in books? And do you are not of course Nell, but do you prefer spending time with characters in books than spending time with actual people?
It's not exactly a question of preference. It's just it's so much of what I do is reading about characters, and there are, I guess, really many more of them, in a time period than people I see, and also the people I see, they tend to be the same people, and they're people that I want to see, whereas the characters, there's this huge variety. I mean, there's strangers that you get to know, actually. But like this character, Nell, who I think that this thing about being less curious about people and more bored, et cetera, has a lot to do with her being older. She was different when she was younger, and that being a part of certain people's personalities, a regrettable one as they get older. In other books that I've written, there's less distance between the author and the narrator, and in this, she's not the narrator, but with this main character and the author, there's a great deal more distance. It's really a different kind of narrative. But now I forget where we all started with this. Okay,
Are you more interested in characters?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I wouldn't say that because people are. I really think this is something. I mean, I remember Speaking of quoting writers. It was Norman Mailer, but I didn't give him credit. I just realized. I say a playwright once said. But I knew perfectly well that it was Norman Mailer who said it because it was on television, like it was on Dick Cavett or something, where he said. He didn't fit. I couldn't just put his name in there. It would be too distracting. So I said, as a playwright once said, there's no such thing as a stupid person. There's no such thing as a stupid human being. And you can find that out by listening. If you listen to anybody long enough, you will realize that person is not stupid. But you may have to listen for a very long time. But when Norman Mailer said that, I thought, he's absolutely right. I do believe that. There's no such thing as an uninteresting person. Maybe it was that, maybe it wasn't, but stupid or uninteresting. There's no such thing as a boring person. That was probably what I said. I really feel.
Anna's wrinkle or furrowing her brow.
They might appear that way, 100%.
No, I fully agree. I was actually thinking about something else. I fully agree.
But it's true that if it was just the two of you somewhere in a situation.
I'm paying attention. I'm paying so much attention.
I made a face.
But if that person were to talk about their life, if they were to find the words, to be able to find the words, and to know that you were caring when you're listening, a human life cannot fail to be interesting.
Absolutely.
That's it. And people don't know that, so they think, oh, they're boring. Only me and my circle, we're fascinating, but, most people are boring. But it's not true, it's the opposite, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, to relate it back to whether characters in books are more interesting than characters in the world, I remember making a really kind of stark choice when I started having children, and I realized that I might not write books, I thought, ever again. That was one thought.
This is when you had children or started talking to children?
Just before I had children, or while pregnant, or we don't go into the timing, all right? So, but I thought maybe there will be no more books. And then some years later, there were more books, but I thought there is no such thing as a book that's as interesting as a child.
Exactly.
Human beings are just much more interesting than whatever is written on a piece of paper. So that was one thing. But then, how we read character is interesting to me. I'm not a character-driven writer to perhaps a extent that, well, I don't know. Okay, so we're kind of using characters, but I do remember a very sweet phase that my daughter went through. We'd be watching, streaming something and sitting on the sofa, and somebody would fuck up, or there would be some pratfall, and she'd say, me. And I wonder if that's actually what we're doing a lot of the time when we're reading books, that we're looking for ourselves, or that we withdraw or engage as we hit points of interest or something that will enrich our sense of ourselves in the world. So I'm not saying the reader is, an entirely selfish person, or I think these processes are much more mysterious than I'm making out. But that me is a kind of nice moment.
You're a much better mother than I am.
Well,
I thought my children were basically high maintenance houseplants for the first 5 years.
So what does that mean? What? No, I
They
wrote
just
like
had to be
Billy.
they just had to be watered, but they didn't really respond to you very much.
To me? What?
No. I'm
Your
never
children
mind.
are
We'll free
houseplants,
associate.
and then there's
We'll free
toilets
associate later.
involved. Your children are houseplants, Marvin.
I want to know what
They're
you were
lovely.
thinking.
I met them. What?
I want to know what you were thinking when I was studying your face.
I was thinking about how we relate to characters, because characters seem to move, but they're actually inert on the page. You can't change them by rereading it.
Right.
Though I suppose you can go back and think about them and see them in a new way. I kind of like, you can't change them by talking to them. Throw the book away or.
Right.
But also in your characters, you can give yourself something that you don't have in real life. For example, when I got to whatever number book it was, when I was writing Salvation City, and I knew I wanted to have this child in it, or this boy, and so in the course of writing this book, I had this child. I had created him, and I don't have children in real life. And then when the book was over, I really missed that boy.
Oh, you always miss them at the end.
You miss them at the end. So
even if they're horrible, and many of my characters are.
Yeah, yes. And you could, who was it? I guess it was Wagner who said he wrote Tristan und Isolde because he wanted to write about a love that he himself had never experienced in life, and then so so there's that too. But that's weird because in his case that meant death and poison, and we all know what the story is. So, but yeah, you could, this idea of creating something that you don't have in your own life, or that, a great love or whatever, great dog. Like everybody, because when I set out to write The Friend, I didn't set out to write about a dog at all. I was around page 30, and I had a character, the widow of this man, say to the friend of this man, the narrator, "Would you come to my house? There's something I want to ask you." Then I got there and said, "Okay, now I have to come up with what's she going to ask?" I didn't know, and that's when I thought, I could put a dog in the story, and I could make it a great big dog, and that's what I did. That wasn't. That's exactly what happened. I didn't know it was going to be about a dog.
What about when you write about real people? Because you've written a memoir of your time or your relationship with Susan Sontag.
Right, but that's not nonfiction. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You've written introductions to. You write a ton of criticism.
Yeah,
and you write introductions. What's
And you wrote
the
about your
John
husband?
John McGahern.
Yeah, John McGahern. Yeah, I love that. I love that introduction. I love that, and I love him. I found him because
Me
of
too.
you.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I
he's
found
very
him
good
because of
writer.
you. It's fantastic. But do you feel when you spend time in the mind of a person whom you haven't invented, you have that same relationship of affection, or is there greater distance because you're dealing with someone who had an independent life prior to your imagination or creation of them?
So I wrote about John McGahern, who wrote about a character who got a woman pregnant and would have had nothing to do with the son. And it was a little known fact that that's exactly what he had done in real life. And it didn't enter, because he's such a revered character, it didn't enter the criticism in the way that other highly autobiographical details did, and difficult details entered the criticism. So I thought that was really intriguing. And I also wrote about Alice Munro and her daughter Andrea and Gerard Fremlin. And so there's many, there's a whole conversation about that. I absolutely adored Alice Munro's work, and I don't love it less in the light of Revelations. I'm just more interested in how I read it back in the day. and how much of the content was skewed by the events of her life. Because I don't idolize writers at all, I don't think, then they have no distance to fall. Or it's like the fall in King Lear where he jumps off the cliff and it's just a ledge. It's like, so I don't, as it were, project on the character or the figure of the writer my hopes and dreams about humanity. Like, come on. And that's not my gaze doesn't go up to a writer. And I think a writer that invites you to look up to them just pisses me off, right?
Let's make a list.
I mean, that is not, I'm by nature a more horizontal kind of relationship person. And so if I get company on the page, as I certainly did from Alice Munro's work, or certainly from Sigrid Nunez's work, if there's a feeling of kind of give and take with the reader and companionship, then that's gold to me,
Yeah. Sigrid's is quite horizontal too. Like when I talk about the way you reference other writers in your work, like here's Elizabeth Hardwick, here's Walter Benjamin, here's Ingeborg Bachmann, I don't feel that as a vertical or a hierarchical relationship. I feel like I'm having all these people kind of gathered in your arms and being brought to me by you.
Well, and usually, I mean, because generally it's about, something that they've written that, has been memorable. And I wanted the freedom of certain of the books that I've written. I wanted that to be part of the narrative. Like I'd be writing something and then I would think, well, wait, didn't Flannery O'Connor say something about that? And then I want to include that, and I do a lot of that. The thing is about being in the minds of a real life person. I never felt with the memoir of Susan Sontag that I don't go into her mind. There's a lot of quotes. My thing there, that's a very short book, which started as an essay, which a small publisher saw and said, do you think you could turn this into a book? And the essay was about 20 pages. And I said, well, I might have like another 100 pages of what I remember about that time and her world and my world, et cetera. So in one way it was easy to write, if anything is ever easy to write, because there was nothing to do but put it all down, exactly what I remembered about that time. But I didn't really try to analyze her, or I just kind of wanted her to sort of speak for herself, which was interesting enough.
But I guess the question was, did you feel the same sort of affection for that character, and did you miss that character after you'd put her on the page in the same way that you feel affection for Miss the Dog?
Oh, well, that relationship was so complicated. It's hard to say, but the thing is that it was, there was a certain amount of nostalgia because I was in my 20s at the time, and she had died. I mean, I never would have written it if she were still alive, actually, of course. But so it did bring that all back. But my feelings about her and my understanding of that time, it didn't really change over time. Not really. So whatever, and as I say, it was so, I did have a lot of affection for her, but also there was just so much conflict.
Right.
But it was fascinating to revisit it in that way, so many years later.
I was thinking about it today because I was thinking about how your story in the Yale Review is in part about how an older person perceives a younger generation, and how a younger generation blames the older generation for the problems that they've inherited. And there are some wonderful kind of dinner table conversations around those issues. And I was thinking too, Anne, about how much of your work is intergenerational as well. And, The Gathering, the Wren. And so I wanted both of you to just reflect a little bit about what the age gap or the generation gap does for you in your fiction.
So 2 small points. I don't feel terribly different about real people when I write about them, but if I have a character walk onto the page, I sometimes go, oh dear, I have to spend 3 years now with this person, and I have to, by the end, forgive them and like them, because somehow they contain a problem or a contradiction that has to be exposed and resolved, sort of in this secret structure of the book. Mm-hmm. And I wrote Campbell, and I thought, oh, you are such a tough nut. And I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to like you by the end of this book, or find ways to empathize. And she has a daughter, Nell. So when who's 23, and Campbell is various ages, there were, in the initial response, some younger people said, how do you know what it is to be a young person? And how do you know all that? How do you know all that? And I want to say, well, I used to be 22, and I was actually writing when I was 22, and nobody would ask me if I wrote a 90-year-old character, how do you know that? We assume that old age is knowable and youth is is incomprehensible. It's a symptom of being young to feel you cannot be understood. That's not an answer, really.
But no. But actually, the essay that you have in this issue is about revisiting younger versions of yourself.
They're all walking around in that piece.
You say something like the ghosts of my younger self are all around.
Yeah. Well, it's a great mystery who one is. I couldn't, that's very mysterious.
Do you feel the same way? Do you feel like it's a great mystery who you are to yourself?
Say that again, that I am a great mystery.
Do you feel like it's a great mystery to you who you are? And do you want to lie down on a couch while I answer this question?
I'm not sure. It's certainly not something that I think about, but I think that part of being a writer is getting that out. You are, even if you're not writing about yourself, you are unraveling the mystery of yourself. Mm-hmm. You're writing about what obsesses you. And this is why so many, we say about fiction writers that, it's certainly very true of somebody like Woolf. They have 2 or 3 ideas, and then they just keep writing the same thing over and over again. They, in different stories, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't know. I guess I don't think of myself as being more mysterious than anyone else.
I'm not trying to enlarge myself by saying it's just.
Oh, really?
It's just kind of like, there I am, 19 years of age on that street, and I remember I didn't put it into the piece. I remember what I was wearing that day, and things like that. So that, yeah. So who is she?
Yeah.
But I do find to compliment what Sigrid is saying, that I write the same story over and over again by accident.
Right.
I think I'm writing something completely different.
And then there you are again.
And there I am again. I'm going, oh no, I've done this already. Sometimes readers don't notice, so don't tell anyone. But in this short story form, I found I was repeatedly writing the story of Orpheus. Mm-hmm. And so that must be some deep structure for me.
Yeah.
Orpheus goes into the underworld and brings up Eurydice and turns around at the last moment and loses her. It's Lot's wife as well. Something about don't look back or don't look around. Yeah. Some taboo about curiosity there for sure.
Right. What's your deep structure?
That's just one of them. Sorry.
That's okay. But it's interesting though, because, and sometimes you don't even notice, like I remember after several books had come out and then I saw, maybe an Amazon review or something, but it was, the person had said, and it wouldn't be a Nunez novel if it didn't have an absent father. And I thought, is that true? And I thought, yes, see, so what, but yeah, see, I hadn't even thought of that, but whatever, that could have been the 4th book or whatever, but yes, the absent father, the missing father, yeah.
Anne has a joke about that, I think, in The Gathering, about how it like wouldn't be an Irish novel if there weren't a drunk and someone hadn't been touched as a child.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's a large family, so it takes in the whole demographic.
Right.
Yeah. There's always a drunk. There's always someone with several houses to which no one is ever invited.
Yeah.
But what is your deep? If you like had to name an archetype, the way Anne has named the Orpheus archetype, could you easily think of one that you realize by now that you keep coming back to?
I'm not sure. I mean, for me, there's always this Proustian thing. This the lost time.
Yeah.
And how that, childhood, it's all about, life is loss. You're always, not necessarily in the most tragic sense at all, but that's what time does to us. You lose, every day you're losing things, and as time goes on, you lose everything that you had, that you loved. It's just what happens. It's what life is. So that, and even when we talk about, we were talking about aging with this afternoon, right? You weren't there, but what did Claire ask you? Why are you interested in aging? And you said, "Oh, how could that? Why would that be?" Okay, and so it's like somebody had said to me more than once, it's like, "Why are you so interested in mortality?" And I said, "Well, at this age, it's more like, why is mortality so interested in me?" And that's what it's about. Right?
Well, speaking of losing time, I have no idea what time it is or how long we're supposed to go. Can somebody tell me what time it is? Time passes. It's question time, says Michael. We will take questions from the audience. I assume we have a roving mic. I do request questions and not long comments or diatribes. So please, yes. I am a woman in academia, of course, yes. Can we get some questions, please?
Can I just say that we really enjoyed the intro?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, that was lovely, Eli.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Eli. Did it bring back time for you? Because that's like the at the end of Proust, right? It's like it can be. Writing reclaims it in a way, right? Writing reclaims it in a way, and I wonder if hearing those first sentences. Sorry, I asked a question.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Someone told me in a writing class when I was young that you have 9 seconds to sell a book. They walk in, they see the cover, they open it, they read the first line, and they move on.
That's
and
true.
that made my opening lines sensationalist in the extreme.
Right.
So it's like.
So your first line should just be, keep reading.
Or a naughty word, the P word, or the P word.
That puts people off, you'd find.
All right,
Questions. Yes, we have one back there.
I have a question for Anne. How did you start writing again after having kids, and how did your kids show up in your books?
So I didn't let the, I felt like Ariadne in the, sorry, it's PTSD. So I found it very difficult to write while pregnant, in the way I thought that no one writes a poem when they're waiting for a bus, because the expectation takes away the possibility for poetry, but for reverie. But I held on to the thread of my writing life, was what I thought of, and groped my way out of the labyrinth. But 6 weeks after my daughter was born, I was nursing her, and I thought this was a beezer. I mean, this was the most amazing thing that had ever happened, that I was breastfeeding a child. And I thought the world would be interested in this. It's like, function over form, and and all of those kind of. So I typed that up at speed and sent it off to the London Review, because I just found it amazing. So for a while, I only wrote about the children because I couldn't really think about anything else, and I wrote a much regretted book about motherhood.
Oh, you wrote, that's right, that book, a whole book about motherhood.
Well, yes,
the title again, the title is?
Making babies.
Making babies, right. I hadn't read
So,
that.
I mean, I don't regret it, but I deeply regret it because it's just like, why are you writing all this? So, except I wanted to kind of remember it, and then of course I never opened it again. But I like a writer who has an eye for a child. I was just thinking about this because Sigrid has, Helen Garner in her diaries has. Yeah. She likes an interesting child. And I needed sometimes to explain to people that my children were actually people in the books, that they had personalities and characters. And children in fiction, especially in Victorian fiction, are often uncanny, and they have no moral agency. They're often used as witnesses or as symbols of something. But my children are people.
Yeah. Helen is so good at that. If I could have had a third chair here with a third person, it would have been Helen alongside the two of you. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
How do you meet your characters? How do they come to exist? It sounded like, Sigrid, when you were discussing, like, kind of bringing them about, it sounded like it was a conscious decision, but then I've also heard other people say that they kind of already know that they exist and it's a matter of putting them to paper. So I'm curious how you come about meeting your characters.
You meeting them? Like,
how do they arrive in your mind?
They really just do. I mean, for one thing, like I don't plan out novels, so I don't think, oh, I am going to write a novel about a protagonist who, etc. I just start with something, and then, particularly sometimes it's a first-person narrator who isn't necessarily me, but there's the character, and then, if you have a character, they have to start doing something, and as they start doing something and acting in the world, they become, and a personality accrues, things just accrue to them. But it's never like I'm thinking about the character in any kind of fullness ahead of time. Maybe in some general way, like in The Vulnerables, I knew what kind of person the narrator was going to be, but I had written about her before, and I did know that I wanted to bring her in contact with this very young man, but I didn't really think of all I knew was what his generation was, what people call Gen Z, but then I just had him appear and thought, well, writing fiction is answering the question, what if, okay? And so I thought, well, imagine if she was in that apartment with him, and then he shows up with his own key, and he's there, and what would he be like? I knew that I wanted him to be extraordinarily good looking. That was part of what the tension was going to be. And then I just have these people interact, and by being and acting, they become their character. Other writers do it the other way. Some writers actually make little dossiers, and they'll even put in there what kind of toothpaste that character would use, even though that's never going to appear in the book, because they feel they have to know the character thoroughly like that. And that is completely foreign to me. That's completely foreign to me.
There's always a lost generation in my novels. There's the preceding generation that doesn't make it into the book. So I do deep historical research in a novel. But my characters come all kinds of different ways. So some of them walk in fully formed. They're more archetypal types, like Lambert Nugent, who is the dark figure in The Gathering. He just walked in, and he wouldn't walk out again. Some of it happens in the naming of the character like that. But some of them are constructed like golems. You stick them together in response to some functional requirement of the text and hope that and some of them I might take someone from real life and change gender or do something else to let them to be in fiction. And then finally, just to say that the ones that are most, that there's something about some characters that are just, I don't even notice. So I had a story in the New Yorker a little while back, and there was a young girl called Orla in it, and she was 10, 11, 12, and people said, oh, Orla is brilliant, and I'm like, where did you get Orla? And I'm going, duh, like, she's just there. And I didn't even notice she was there. She was just such a natural reach, you know?
I think we have time for one more, probably. So raise your hand high so Eli can come to you, and be brave. Be brave. There are enough writers in this room that somebody should raise a hand. Yes, there's a hand. Thank you.
Hello, I think in extension of the previous question, I'm curious to hear more about when characters have ever changed on you, whether it's that a character incited or wanted to do something that surprised you, or an attribute about the character themselves that, like an occupation or a character trait or some quality that surprised you or that they changed on you.
Cool.
Well, actually, because of the way I write, that is part of the process. That, since I'm not committed to anything, yes, I might have some idea that this person is going to behave in a certain way, and then by the time I get to that point in the story, I have to change that. But nothing particularly radical. It's not like I have ever, which has happened to other writers, who started out writing about somebody that I thought was going to be a good character, and then lo and behold, they turn into somebody actually quite nasty. That hasn't happened with me.
You have to hold their contradictions, and I suppose they can tip whatever way. But for me, the going back to, it's all about change.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So going back to Wallace Stevens' notes towards the supreme fiction, he says it must be abstract, it must change, it must give pleasure. And I'm no further on than that, than when I read those as a student.
Well, and it's also different. I mean, with a novel, you are living with that narrative for quite a long time and working on it every day. There's a lot of room there for all kinds of changes. And with a story, it's different. But very often with a story, you don't have this big character development. Usually with a story, there's some central incident or something, you don't, but it's really with the novel where where somebody does develop psychologically and whatever and over time. So you can count on them doing that part of the work for you in a sense. If you're there with them long enough and they are interacting and behaving and thinking and being and whatever, those changes are just going to happen.
My characters are usually sorting it out. It's usually they're coming through something more or less better at the end than it was at the beginning. Certainly in the middle. And at 3/4, of course, as we know, it's going to be terrible.
Well, we've passed the 3/4 mark of this conversation, so thank you to both of you for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.